Okay, so this is a shirt that I don't normally wear. This is a shirt that I purchased, I think, in 2012, and I never really wore it because I didn't like the collar, the shape of the collar, and I didn't like the shape. It also has a double cuff, which I don't mind, but I tend to get lazy and lose my cufflinks and so on. But especially because of the shape of the collar. The most important, if you probably go through a list of shirts you have and think of the ones you like and think of the ones you don't like and don't wear, and if you look at the collar shapes, it's probably because collar shape depends on face shape and face size and so forth. So anyway, I wanted to change the collar, and I've done that, but it's very simple. I might talk about it in a subsequent video. But at the moment, having changed the collar, looking forward to wearing it, I still haven't really worn it because of the double cuffs, which annoy me. So, here, I don't know how well you can see. This is one that I've done. And if you look carefully along there's a thin row of stitching along the edge, and also, importantly, along the top edge there, which is where the cuff would have been open when it was double. So here's one that I have not done. So here's one that's still double. So as you can see, it's quite large, and it's designed to fold over this way towards the top, and then you stick a cufflink through there and attach it round that way. So I generally find that quite annoying. So I wanted to think of a way to make a double cuff into a single cuff. And there's a shirt shop that I used to buy shirts from, and I asked them and they said, oh, it's a £15 alteration or something. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? So I came up with a way of doing it. I think there are other ways of doing it on the internet, but I thought of a way based on a shirt cuff making tutorial by a YouTube channel called Professor Pincushion, which I think is probably the best sewing YouTube channel on the internet. So she actually constructs the cuff in the first place by having a double cuff, and then folds it over and sews it. And I thought, well, why not? The only thing that I decided to do was to take off one of the layers of blue fabric here, so that the cuff wouldn't end up too bulky, too stiff and too bulky. So I have to go and find my seam ripper, but basically you have to rip the seam around here to take off one layer of blue, and once I've done it you'll understand. And if you don't know how to use a seam ripper, I think there are probably many tutorials that are better than mine, but essentially you put, let me go and get it, 1 second. Okay, so this thing is a seam ripper. I've never really known why it's got two different prongs, but anyway, usually I use the long one, and I don't know if you can see in enough detail here, but say, one last thing probably worth mentioning. So now this is the whole cuff. This is the blue cloth on one side that we ripped off with a seam ripper. I have to admit I got a bit lazy and just ripped it by hand. I don't know if that's advisable. Then it ends up attached here to in the portion towards the arm, And what I just generally do is just cut this with scissors. Cut this flap off where it attaches to the rest of the arm with a pair of scissors. And I think there's two reasons for not seam ripping that. One, on some sleeves it's a single seam, so if you rip that seam the whole cuff comes off. And the other reason is just to save time. So now you have this, and if you're interested, if you look at the Professor Pincushion video for how to make a shirt cuff if you're making a shirt, this is how she does it. She uses one piece. Some cuff tutorials use two pieces. But she uses one large piece, attaches interfacing, folds it up and stitches it around the line. So that's what gave me the idea to alter an existing double cuff this way. So now what I'm going to do is exactly that. Fold this up, pin it, because we're going to do it in a sewing machine. You could do it by hand, I suppose. I have done it by hand before. So then we're going to pin it so you don't see the white stuff anymore. You're going to pin it like this, closed, and then sew it. So I'll just very briefly say I like to pin it because of the way it will go in the sewing machine. It's going to go this, it's going to travel vertically. So it's nice to put the pins, because you take out the pins as you sew, so it's nice to put the pins so that they're horizontal to the line of travel of the fabric in the sewing machine, if that makes any sense. I'll pin these and then show you how to sew it. Okay, so this is an extremely basic sewing machine. Oops, my camera fell down. It's an extremely basic sewing machine. The brand is John Lewis, and it was very cheap. And I think it cost me about £60 on sale. And it's been fantastic, and I've had it for a year, and I use it quite extensively. So if you want to do it by hand, you can look up some hand sewing tutorials. I may put some links in the description. So this, the cuff and the pinned looks like this now, roughly. And if you use more pins, you'll be more accurate, but I'm lazy, so I'm not doing that. Then basically this, you're going to stitch all the way around like a rectangle. But this edge and this edge are open, as you can see. And this edge is closed. Although it's closed, shirts with a single cuff usually have a line of stitching here called edge stitching, because it's close to the edge. So it looks much nicer and neater if you stitch along there as well. I usually stitch along here, and you can just follow the line of the previous stitching that you've ripped. I start with the two ends, and then I do, and then I think I do this part, and then I do this part. And when you do this part, because it's open, and because it's got pleats in the shirt, you have to be quite careful that you keep the fabric stretched, so you don't end up with a pucker in the middle. And in case you do, I tend to use the largest, you can't see it, but the largest size stitch, which on this machine is 4, because then if you make a mistake it's easier to rip it out. Theoretically, then when you've done that, it's called a basting stitch, you could remove, you could go over it with a tighter stitch, but again, that's up to you. Okay, so sewing machines can only go vertically. They can only stitch vertically. So do it like this. And I think it's a good idea. Just prick myself. So I think it's a good idea to keep it quite very close to the edge. And then you sew the back stitches to keep it secure. You'll have to cut this thread and then start again and go all the way down here and all the way around. Okay, so just to show you how nice it looks when it's finished, and it's a very quick alteration. You can see where the pins are still in. This is the end of the cuff next to by your wrist, and this is the part that goes up to the rest of the sleeve. There is a trick. Obviously you have to trim these little stray bits, and you have to decide, so if the buttonholes line up, because there's a buttonhole on this side and a buttonhole on this side from when it was a double cuff. If you've done it very precisely, they might line up. Yeah, this one lines up. So you can see, so you can just use that as an existing buttonhole. If it doesn't line up, you can just sort of cut through there with a scalpel to reopen the hole. And then on the other side you're going to need a button. You could sew over this with a zigzag stitch and then sew the button on top, but lazy man's solution is just sew the button slightly above there. So that's it, a quick and lovely single cuff. If anybody has any questions, I'm aware that it's not the most comprehensive or kind of it's a quick and very basic thing, but I mainly made it to remind myself. But I thought, because I keep making notes of how I do these things, and then it's quite hard to remember the physical movements from the notes. So, you know, these are mainly notes to myself, but in case they help anyone else, that would be great. So if there are any comments, just put them in the comment section. There is a trick to going round here. If you don't do this one by one, one, and then one, there's a trick to sewing round this corner, if you want to do that. But if anybody's curious about it, I'll point you to a video that shows it quite clearly, how to do that. You just leave the needle in the fabric and you lift up the foot and you pivot the fabric. Anyway, thanks for watching.